Welcome to the Deep Dive. We're here to unpack fascinating sources and really get to the heart of some big ideas for you.
And today we're tackling one of the heaviest, the problem of evil.
Exactly, that age-old question. How can you have a God who is supposed to be all good, all powerful, when there's just so much suffering, so much pain and horror in the world? It's haunted people forever.
It really has. And in this deep dive, we're looking at sources that don't just try to answer the question, they challenge the question itself. They suggest maybe we're framing it all wrong.
Like measuring wind with a ruler, as one source puts it, trying to grasp something with the wrong tools entirely.
Precisely. Our main source for this is called The Problem of Evil Rewritten, a Christian Pantheist response to J.L. Mackie.
Ha, Mackie. J.L. Mackie's 1955 essay, Evil and Omnipotence, is, well, it's hugely influential, isn't it?
Absolutely foundational for the modern debate. His argument is very clear, very logical.
Right. He basically says, one, if God is omnipotent, he could prevent evil. Two, if God is wholly good, he would want to prevent evil.
3, evil exists. You can't deny that.
Therefore, Mackie concludes, God is either not omnipotent or not wholly good or, well, maybe God just doesn't exist. It's clean, rational.
It is. It's an elegant argument.
Ah,
But our source says it's completely misdirected.
okay, misdirected. Why? It seems so logical.
Because, the source argues, Mackie presupposes a version of God I do not recognize. He's arguing against a specific idea of God.
What kind of idea?
The idea of God as a kind of cosmic mechanic, maybe, or an absentee landlord, a celestial judge.
Yeah.
A God who is fundamentally separate from the world.
Okay, a detached creator.
Exactly. And that separation, that distance, our source claims that's the root illusion. That's where the problem starts.
So if separation is the illusion, what's the alternative? What does Christian pantheism propose instead?
It proposes God isn't separate at all. God is being itself. God is the world, the actual fabric of reality.
Wow, okay. Not a painter standing back from the canvas, but the canvas and the paint.
And the painter, all of it. The breath, the lungs, and lungs of the lungs, as the source puts it. God doesn't pull levers from above. God is the world unfolding.
That changes everything, doesn't it? If God is the world, then asking why God allows evil, it kind of dissolves.
The question itself gets rewritten. It's no longer, why does a separate God permit suffering?
It becomes...
It becomes, what does suffering mean when God isn't out there, but in here, inside the experience itself?
So it's less about defending God of theodicy and more about exploring meaning.
Right. The source calls it theopoetics and deconstruction. It's about understanding the divine through the reality we experience, including the suffering, not justifying it from outside.
And this points towards the incarnation, right? That core Christian idea.
It definitely foreshadows it. The source mentions the figure hanging on that door, broken and bleeding. Christ on the cross, not as a stranger to suffering, but as a mirror.
A mirror reflecting.
Reflecting the God who doesn't stop pain from the outside, but enters into it, transforms it from within.
Okay, let's dig into that. Mackie's framework. Omnipotence, goodness, evil. Seems solid, but you're saying it rests on a specific foundation.
Yes, the foundation of classical theism, the idea that God is ontologically distinct, existing separately outside the universe, acting on it.
Like an architect who designed the building but doesn't live in it?
Pretty much. Christian pantheism starts somewhere completely different.
Yeah.
God isn't external. God is the pulse within.
Not a being, but being itself.
Exactly. The source, the substance, the structure of reality, the infinite awareness in which everything happens.
So if God is in the evil, not just watching it, the question becomes,
What does it mean that God is present in this evil? Not endorsing it, obviously, but inhabiting it, experiencing it.
that's a radical thought. Mackie's God makes decisions from a throne somewhere else.
While the pantheist God, to use the source's image, bleeds through the grain of every tree, the fear in every scream, and the stillness in every grave, it's incredibly intimate.
So the first crack in Mackie's argument from this view is that his God is, well, too small, too limited.
Yes, too small. Mackie assumes power has to mean control. Goodness has to mean protection in a simple sense. And suffering is just bad data with no deeper spiritual meaning.
And Christian pantheism says those assumptions are too narrow.
Right. Theologically shallow, the source calls them, because they trap God within human ideas of power and goodness.
It's like asking why the ocean allows waves, or why a song has sad notes. If God is the ocean is the song, the question itself changes shape, doesn't it?
It loses its footing. Suffering isn't an external problem God failed to fix. It becomes part of the divine unfolding, something intrinsic.
So we need to move beyond this dichotomy. God is either the hero who stops all bad things or the villain who lets them happen.
What if God is neither? What if God is the play itself, not just the playwright, the cry, not just the rescuer, the soil we rise from, not just the hand pulling us up,
That connects to what Jesus taught, not just obeying some external rule maker.
but awakening to the kingdom within? Luke
Yep.
17:21. He promised presence, not necessarily safety.
Which brings us back to the incarnation. The idea that the divine doesn't avoid pain, but walks right into it.
Not to magically erase suffering, but to redeem it through union, through becoming one with it,
It's that powerful image again. Mackie's God would logically prevent the cross.
while the pantheist Christ climbs onto it, embraces it.
Okay, let's talk about omnipotence then. Mackie defines it as the ability to prevent suffering, override choices, make everything perfect.
If God can do that and doesn't, then either God isn't all-powerful or isn't all good. That's Mackie's logic.
But the source pushes back hard on that definition of power itself.
Completely. It argues that definition isn't divine, it's imperial. It's the logic of Caesar, not Christ. Power as domination, control.
Treating evil like a management problem God failed to solve.
Exactly. Christian Pantheism says divine power isn't force, it's presence. It's not domination, it's immanence. God being intimately present in all reality.
So true power isn't stopping the storm.
It's being the stillness beneath the storm. Divinity measured by intimacy, not intervention.
So when we ask why God lets evil happen, the answer isn't distance or indifference.
No, the terrifying, maybe sacred implication is, what if God never left? What if God is in the wound, in the body on the floor, in the grieving mother, in the child?
The question shifts from, why didn't God stop this?
To, what does it mean that God is here, experiencing this with us, as us?
And that's the radical edge of Christ you mentioned. Not a fixer, but a mirror.
Yes, he doesn't cancel pain, he carries it, bleeds with it, doubts with it. That cry from the cross, my God, why have you forsaken me?
That's not God failing.
It's God embodying our sense of abandonment from the inside,
Here.
echoing human grief, showing solidarity. The cross isn't God's silence, the source says it is God's scream.
So Mackie assumes power is rescue, but Jesus promises resonance.
Exactly. Remember the Beatitudes. Blessed are those who mourn, not after they stop mourning, but right in it. Blessing found within the struggle.
So divine power is invitational, not imposing.
It's the power to be with, not to bend, to saturate, not to dominate, transforming things from within, through presence, not by avoiding the mess.
There's a line here, omnipotence as domination leads to tyranny.
But omnipotence as communion, that is a fire no empire can touch. It reveals a God made near by horror, not distant, woven into it, redeeming it from inside out.
Not the hand stopping the knife.
But the light that refuses to go out, even as the knife falls.
Okay, let's shift to suffering itself. For classical theism, and certainly for Mackie, suffering looks like a mistake, a glitch, evidence of failure.
Something that needs explaining away or justifying.
But the Christian Pantheist view reframes it completely. It's not a flaw.
Not a flaw, but a language, a teacher. Even a shadow without which light has no edge. It's seen as a kind of sacred necessity.
Why necessary?
Because a world without cost, without struggle, might be a hollow simulation where nothing matters. We grow in the breaking, not in constant ease.
And Jesus points to this, blessing the torn, the mourning.
Yes, suggesting their wounds aren't just scars, but invitations into the holy. Mackie treats suffering like objective data to be analyzed.
But it's not data, is it? It's lived experience.
It is existential, the source insists. It's where theology dies and something truer begins.
And Jesus' response wasn't a philosophical treatise on suffering.
No, he walked into it, touched the leper, wept with Mary and Martha, shouldered it, shared it.
This really gets to the core of Christian pantheism. God isn't found by escaping pain, but within it.
Right, not above your breakdown, but in it. In the ache behind your ribs, in the moment when faith is gone and you whisper anyway.
So suffering isn't punishment, but maybe a process.
A fiery crucible, the source calls it, where compassion is forged, ego melts away, the illusion of being separate starts to dissolve.
And what we call evil, the clashes between people.
Often the friction of free wills, yes. But even through that conflict, something divine can emerge. Forgiveness, growth, rebirth, hidden in the pain.
There's that quote about the cross again.
The cross is not a symbol of divine failure. It is the image of God's most intimate knowing. It shows God understands suffering not academically, but viscerally.
So Mackie wants a world where goodness erases pain.
But Jesus shows a path where goodness transfigures it, works through it, finds meaning within it,
It's a perspective that acknowledges the hurt, the reality of it.
and still whispers, beneath the blood and silence there is something sacred unfolding, not despite the pain, but through it.
All right, let's tackle freedom. Mackie had issues with the free will defense, right? Why not just make beings who always choose good?
Exactly. If God's omnipotent, why not program us for perpetual virtue? Avoid all this mess.
But again, Christian pantheism seems to have a totally different understanding of freedom.
Completely. For Mackie, freedom is like an external capability granted to us, like a feature in software.
But for Christian pantheism,
Freedom isn't something we have from God. It's God expressing God's self as us, through us, within us. It's not a gift. It's something God is.
so we're not separate agents being watched.
We're threads in the divine fabric. And free will isn't just a feature. It's a sacred risk woven into the structure of being itself.
Why risk?
Because real love requires real choice. And real choice means the possibility of dissonance, of missing the mark, of hurting ourselves and others.
And God isn't just watching these choices.
God is the chooser within the choosers, feeling the pull of every desire, the hesitation behind every choice. When we love, it's God loving through us. When we hate,
It's God experiencing what forgetting love feels like.
that's the radical intimacy, yes. It doesn't excuse hatred, but it locates the experience within the divine field.
So even evil, in this view, isn't entirely separate from God.
It's seen as the shadow cast by freedom. And freedom is how consciousness learns, how it becomes aware of itself. Think about the Garden of Eden story.
Not a trap, but a mirror. Not a failure, but the start of awareness.
The beginning of longing, maybe? The separation needed to eventually choose reunion consciously?
So Mackie's God has to eliminate evil or seem negligent.
But the pantheist God feels evil from within, redeems the story by becoming part of it, not by erasing chapters,
Freedom means we can wander, weep.
and still be met by the God who walks beside you, even in the dark. It's that line, you are not being watched, you're being lived.
And the cross fits into freedom how? Not punishment for bad choices.
That's solidarity with our choices, even the painful ones. The cross says, even here, lost in the consequences of freedom, I am with you, especially here.
So true freedom isn't being shielded from pain.
It's the power to choose love despite knowing pain. And that capacity, that terrifying ability to choose, that's God learning humanity and humanity learning divinity.
Okay, let's look at evil itself. Mackie sees it as evidence against God, a rebellion, contradictory to a good creator.
Which makes sense if you assume that dualism, God over here, evil over there, as separate forces.
But Christian pantheism rejects that dualism.
Fundamentally, if God is the fabric of everything, if there's no outside to God, then evil can't be a foreign invasion. It has to be something else.
Something more intimate, as you said. How is it defined then?
Not as rebellion, but as resonance lost. Like falling out of tune with the fundamental harmony of being.
So not an enemy force, but a dissonance, a forgetting.
Exactly. God misheard, misremembered. It's not active rebellion against God, it's amnesia, forgetting our connection to the divine source and each other.
But the consequences are horrific. Wounds, crimes.
Undeniably real. This view doesn't minimize the horror, but it refuses to give evil ontological independence. It doesn't see evil as a separate thing existing on its own.
Judgment isn't thunder from above.
It's vibration. The natural consequences of dissonance rippling through a connected reality. You don't need a separate hell. Hell is the present condition of a soul out of tune.
Mackie wants evil explained or erased. This offers transformation through remembrance.
Yes, Jesus didn't just condemn external acts of evil, he turned inward, showing its roots in the heart. But even there, he didn't condemn and leave. He entered, communed, loved.
So the difficult truth is, if God is in all things,
Then God is even in the pain. Not causing it, not approving it, but accompanying it, inviting us back into harmony, back into the song.
which leads us inevitably back to the cross. If anything confronts evil head on, it's that image.
Right. Mackie's argument stays clean, logical, metaphysical, untouched by blood, as the source says. It doesn't weep or scream.
But Christian pantheism confronts the blood and the screaming because it offers a God who suffers.
Precisely. The cross isn't seen as a clever theological fix or a payment. It's a metaphysical unveiling.
Right.
The infinite God choosing to experience finitude, limitation, pain.
Not rescue from suffering, but union with suffering.
Exactly. And this is where Mackie's framework really breaks down, according to this view. He assumes a God above it all who should intervene.
But the God in Christ enters the mess. becomes the stone, the wound, the scream.
And that cry of dereliction, my God, why have you forsaken me? It's not God failing God.
It's God embodying our feeling of abandonment, voicing the grief of every seemingly unanswered prayer.
Yes. Becoming fully human, feeling it all, shattering the illusion of divine separateness.
So Mackie says power is prevention. The cross says power is presence that endures.
Presence that refuses to leave, even when nailed in place. God doesn't stop the nails. God receives them.
What did that say about evil, then? It doesn't disprove God.
It reveals God, veiled in flesh, vulnerable, unmoved in mercy. A God willing to be crucified by creation is love, the source argues.
The cross is not a symbol of what God demands. It is a mirror of what God endures. That's powerful.
It shifts everything. Suffering isn't erased, it's given divine company. Transcendence isn't escape, it's found in the depths. The sacred sinks into the wounds.
So Mackie asks, how can God be good if evil exists?
And Christian Pantheism flips it. What if God's goodness is most visible in the willingness to suffer with us, as us, through us?
The crucified God doesn't justify pain.
He inhabits it, transfigures it, refuses to let death have the final word, not by avoiding it, but by going through it and rising anyway, reauthoring the story from within.
This isn't the God of neat logic.
This is the God of blood, transforming the problem of evil into communion.
Okay, let's bring it all together. Mack's formulation. Omnipotent God could prevent evil. Good God would want to. Evil exists, therefore. Contradiction.
And that airtight structure. It only works if you accept the premise of a separate, controlling God. Change the premise, and the structure dissolves.
The premise change being...
God isn't the engineer outside the cosmos. God is the consciousness out of which the cosmos unfolds. Not elsewhere, but everywhere. Not a being with preferences, but being itself.
So for Mackie, evil is a glitch, a contradiction, a reason to doubt.
For Christian pantheism, evil, however horrific, isn't a contradiction to God. It's a manifestation of God's own immanence, grappling with the limits, the friction, the finitude of created existence. It's God's own becoming through limitation, contrast, and freedom.
And freedom is key here, not Mackie's wind-up doll singing hymns.
But real freedom, which has to include the possibility of failure, of falling, of hurting, because consciousness, real love, real growth, they require risk.
A soul that can't fall apart isn't really a soul.
It's just a script. Meaning comes from the freedom to rupture and the possibility of return, of grace.
And let's be clear again, this isn't about minimizing horror, not spiritualizing genocide or romanticizing pain.
Not at all. It's saying something perhaps even more profound. God isn't just watching this happen. God is in it.
In the mother's scream, the refugee boat, the car crash, the overdose, the cancer ward.
In the perpetrator and the victim, in the wound, in the healing hand, in the last breath and the grief that follows. Not causing it, the source emphasizes, but not abandoning it either.
Mackie demands God stop suffering. The pantheist Christ joins it.
And that act of joining undoes Mackie's whole framework. You can't argue God is absent when, in this view, your nails are in her hands.
So evil isn't God's failure. It's the cost of a universe where love and consciousness are real.
And God pays that cost with us, from within. The sacred isn't absent when evil happens. The sacred is what remains through it all.
This perspective doesn't offer easy answers, does it? It doesn't make the grief go away.
No. But it refuses to offer a picture of God that feels false in the face of suffering. It says God isn't manipulating things from afar. God is here, to be broken in it, to rise within it, making all things new from the inside out.
So Mackie thought he'd found a paradox, an airtight case against the traditional God. Goodness, power, suffering incompatible.
But maybe the flaw wasn't in God, but in the question. His image of God, the Sky King, the watchmaker, the distant engineer, was too small, too neat to hold the messy reality of existence.
And that God, the source says, maybe should be rejected as a fiction.
But Christian pantheism offers a different story, doesn't it? A God within the world, not beyond it. Inside the scream, not above the suffering.
We worship the presence that refuses to leave, even when nailed down.
And that means the problem of evil isn't solved with logic, with syllogisms. It's transfigured through communion, through shared presence.
God isn't absent in pain. God is the one sitting with you when there are no words left.
God is the wound that somehow glows, the grief that shapes you, the whisper that says, I know this.
It's not rejecting reason, but maybe. Reason bowing before love, logic meeting the reality of the cross.
Where divine goodness doesn't stand apart from evil, but enters it, lives through it, until even death is changed from within.
This view doesn't deny evil, it names it, feels it.
And then speaks that almost unbearable truth. Even this is held within the divine. There's no easy answer. But there is presence. There is a song under the noise. There is God on the cross.
And because of that, the question really does change.
It's no longer, why does God allow suffering?
It is, what kind of God stays through it?
And the profound answer from Christian pantheism, ours does.